So welcome to this special edition of Acacia EdTalks, where we're celebrating Neurodiversity Celebration Week. At Acacia, we believe that diverse minds bring incredible strengths to the workplace. And today I'm absolutely delighted because one of my favourite colleagues that I've ever worked with is sat with me, and this is Anne, who will tell you far more about herself and in a much better way than I will. But she's here today to share her story with us. So thank you ever so much, Anne, for joining us. We're going to talk about the challenges that you faced, but we're going to really look at those unique strengths that you bring to our team, and what neurodiversity means to you, and how that impacts you on a day-to-day basis, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds great.
Fab. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role at Acacia?
So I started here 5 years ago, new into role, tutor, never done it before. I've worked my way to now be promoted to be a CQL. So I now support and lead 5 tutors at the moment, and I support them with quality. I help them to support learners through the EPA process, and yeah, just generally there when they need them, when I need it.
Lovely, thank you. So, and I know we've had this conversation many times over the years, but when did you first become aware of your idea? I'm going to get that word right one day. Neurodiversity. Yeah, I suppose your journey. So, can you tell us about your diagnosis? Can you tell us, just where that all started for you?
Yeah, so one of my children, I've got 4 children, had difficulties all through school, and he began the assessment process. During the assessment process, and it was, well, mum does that. That's, something mum does. Came up a lot in his assessments. And then when they discussed, things that weren't part of a neurotypical house, it was kind of, well, that's the way we've always done things. And that's when his doctor kind of flagged that maybe I should go and seek some support. So I did, and I was going through the assessment process when I started with Acacia. So it was something that was still ongoing. And I got my diagnosis officially just after I started with Acacia, which was also the time during COVID as well. So we were managing COVID as well as the diagnosis. Was a surprise, but then also wasn't. So it kind of, once they told me and explained things, it's kind of looked back and it was like, that makes sense, and that explains that, and that explains this. And I love education, I love teaching, I love learning, but I did awful in school, and part of that was because of accommodations weren't made that needed, because we didn't know. So yeah, I haven't been diagnosed that long, only sort of 5 years, but it was because of my son needing to be diagnosed that's how I found out.
And how did you feel when you got that diagnosis about talking about it at work?
At work, so I'd already spoken to my line manager at the time. It was to do with processes and things. So the way things were written, I was struggling to understand, and I was struggling to work out what I needed to do and when I needed to do it. So I had an honest conversation with my line manager and said that I'm going through this assessment. I don't know if I'm going to be diagnosed or not. It might not be. That's when she said, well, you obviously don't learn the same way as everyone else does. Everybody learns differently. That's fine. Let's see what we can put in place. And it was a big relief, because amongst the community, which I was looking into at the time, they would report that a lot of employers weren't accommodating of this, and that to keep your diagnosis quiet, yada, yada, yada. Whereas actually I found it to be the complete opposite. The more I asked for help, the more I got, and the more everybody was happy, because they knew why I was asking for the help, and they just wanted me to be good at my job and to do the best I could. And if it meant changing something slightly, then so be it.
Right, yeah, that's really good to hear. Not that I'm surprised, I've been here long enough to know that that's what would happen. But that really is so often the case, isn't it? The fear of having that conversation, never mind all the things it could lead to and what have you. So, it's great that you were able to have that conversation, and actually it's meant all of the things it has, and fantastic, because you're still here 5 years later. So it definitely paid off. So what did your diagnosis tell you, Anne?
Well, I think it helped me to understand why I am the way I am, and that just because I'm not falling in line with other people, and I don't think the same way, and I don't learn the same way, and I don't always react the same way in situations, that it helped me have that reason. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. And I think sometimes it was that change of attitude, where before I was diagnosed, it was sort yourself out, what on earth is going on, to actually there was a reason behind this, and that should be respected and accommodated, rather than you're an adult, you're a parent, you should be doing it this way. Well, actually, no, if that doesn't work for me, then I'll find another way to do it. And that's stubbornness as well, falls into that too.
Yeah, we've talked about how we may be quite similar in that way.
Yeah.
So ADHD and autism, am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the ADHD is under assessment, but the autism is diagnosed.
Yeah. Okay. So in that, and managing both of those neurodiversities, what are the challenges that you've encountered, whether in the workplace or at home, with those two?
I think, as anyone that knows a bit about both, it's the clashes. So for me, I mean, I have boxed them off, and they're not necessarily that, but with the love routine, absolutely great, know what I'm doing when I'm doing it. However, sometimes the ADHD and the impulsivity is like, I don't want to follow a routine, it's boring. So I find that can clash quite a lot, both home and work. So I like to know what I'm doing and when I'm doing it, but at the same time, you sort of get there one day and go, I don't want to do that today. Actually, that's quite, it's not me today. It's working through that, and making sure that you're still getting your job done and getting what you need to do, and at home making sure you're cooking the dinner and everything, like even if you don't fancy cooking, it's got to be done. And it's memory as well, where your brain's going a million miles an hour all the time. You're doing 10 things at once and nothing gets done as a result. So you've got 50 tabs open on your laptop, but you haven't actually finished anything that day, but you've been really productive as far as you're concerned.
Yeah, that's always an interesting one to battle. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any misconceptions that you think people have about neurodiversity that you'd like to take the opportunity to challenge?
I think sometimes the assumption is that the stereotypical views of autism and ADHD, it's the autism of people have that view of what autism is, which is the very strict routines, the monotone voice, the not good with people and communicating, and can be rude and that's very different. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Yes, communication can be an issue for most of us, it's part of the diagnostic criteria, but depending on the autistic person, depends on the communication issue. And it's the same with any of it. You've met one ADHD, you've met one. Everyone assumes it's that squirrel running around at a million miles an hour, like Hammy off under the hedge. But actually, not all of us are like that. Some of us look quite calm on the surface. However, in our brains, that's where it's all happening. And that's quite common for women and females in ADHD. Ours all happens inside. So I look like I'm calm, but actually there's about 10 things going on in my head at once.
Yeah. And that recognition of each individual and their experience and how their neurodiversity impacts their day-to-day life, just like each of us want to be treated as an individual and should be treated as an individual because we don't all work the same, we don't like to behave in the same way, then it's an addition to that, isn't it? Because that's part of what makes you exactly who you are. And I think this is why I like some of the information that's out there and some of the fantastic causes that are really champion neurodiversity. Actually, people talking more about the superpowers that it brings, because it absolutely does. Whatever the neurodiversity or however we experience it, then there are superpowers for each and every neurodiversity. So I'm going to ask you about yours. What are your superpowers, Anne?
Well, you ask my colleagues, it's my pattern recognition. So I'm really good at, when we get these spreadsheets and data and, these trends, we can see that something's declining or something's rising. And I'm good at spotting the why. Why is this rising? Why is this not right? Whereas others can be trawling through spreadsheets for days trying to figure, and I can look at it and go, actually, that's the issue. So it's something one colleague in particular really likes, because she will come and say, I can see there's an issue, but I can't see why, and I'll look through it. I think I'm also very good at looking outside the box, because I'm used to having to find alternatives to me, and where I've got neurodiverse children as well. None of us are neurodiverse in the same way. So I'm having to come up with different solutions at home as well as work. So when we have got neurodiverse colleagues or neurodiverse learners, People say, oh, they're not learning. I can sit here and look at it and go, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Whereas someone, a neurotypical individual that hasn't really had much exposure to neurodiversity, can sometimes struggle to, well, I've done it this way, it's not working, so it's not working. Actually, there's about a million different ways we can try. Let's have a go.
Yeah, and that's so often because of, as you rightly said, because you've had to find alternative ways. It is your default is more to look at how many different ways in which we could do that,
Yeah.
rather than this is the way it's done, and I'll only find another route if it's needed. You'll go
Yeah.
in with that mindset, which is great. And I have to be honest, really jealous of the data one. I won't lie, to be able to pick up spreadsheets and pick out those things. I think that's something so many people will be really
It's all
envious.
right until you're watching a TV show, because obviously pattern recognition works for that too.
You
So
know
you're
what's
watching a
happening every
telly
time.
and you're going, I know how this ends. And then you get to the end and you go, see, told you. And it kind of takes the fun out of watching a TV show for the first time.
Yeah, because the ability to switch it off isn't there, is it? That's the other thing, like so many traits that we'd all wish we could turn off sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that must be a real challenge, because I really like those shows where I can't guess what's going to happen. So yeah. Oh
I
no,
mean,
that
some
yeah.
catch me out, but others, you just look at it and you go, I know what's going to happen. Oh, right, here we go. Yep, that was right. That's how,
Yeah.
yeah.
You've got to find a very particular show to get engaged with. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So,
So can you give us an example or a time when you've had to use that unique way of thinking to solve a problem, or where you've added value to a project that you've been doing as a team?
um, I would say I think it's supporting our neurodiverse learners, I think sometimes, especially with the newer tutors that are new to the world of education. We had one learner that had quite a variation of learning needs, dyslexia, ADHD, but they'd never been diagnosed up until we supported them. And because they were ESOL as well and had English as their second language, a lot of times they were dismissed as, well, it's because English is your second language, it's not because you're dyslexic. But we supported the learner with alternative assessment methods. We broke things down, and I did get a message from him not long after he qualified to say that he'd actually managed to push and get himself a dyslexia diagnosis. So that was a real success for me. It really supported him to understand that just because you're ESOL and you've got English as a second language doesn't mean to say that that's invalidates the fact that you are dyslexic. You can still be dyslexic as an Italian. It doesn't mean, and that's what we did. So I supported him with that, and it was really successful. And he achieved and he qualified. So
Amazing.
for me,
And
that
that's
was a
when
big
it
success.
yeah, that's when it matters, and that's when you get all those warm and fuzzy
Yeah,
feelings. Yeah, and that's
definitely.
why we do what we do. And I think that's, the more and the longer I'm in education, unfortunately, the more we see people who've been missed by the system that we
Yes.
currently have. We know that, potentially one in five people are dyslexic, but how many of those kids, and both you and I have had to fight our system for
Mm-hmm.
whether it's assessment, diagnosis, because again, because of these individual traits and the individual ways that it comes out, and isn't necessarily seen
No.
in that environment, whereas we're seeing different things at home. So and that's not a criticism of
No.
our incredible educators and the schools, but we have
Not at all.
systems that are not allowing for
No.
each individual to get the education they need.
No.
It is a real challenge, and why we see so many people who come through into apprenticeships as adults that
Mm-hmm.
are disillusioned by education because of
Yeah.
the experience they've had, and it's been put down to behaviour, or
Mm-hmm.
thankfully we're coming further away from the, well, you were just naughty, or you were
Yeah.
thick, but unfortunately we still hear it.
Yeah.
Genuinely, we still hear it from our learners that that's what they were told.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can help not only our tutors but our learners to really see that is so incredibly important. But
Definitely.
it's the one thing I'd always say to people, that we all have our own ways to find that, but we also all need to be enabled, and we need to ask the question. We won't always recognize it in ourselves, so if we're seeing it in other people, talk to people about it. Don't be afraid to go and ask the question, and as educators we should always be asking that question to make sure that we're getting the best for any individual. Fab.
Definitely.
Okay, so thankfully, you've had an experience where you felt like you could go and talk to your manager, and it's made a real difference to you when you've had that diagnosis and then going into the workplace. But what do you think other businesses or teams can do to be more inclusive and supportive of neurodiverse colleagues?
I think most of it is just treating people as individuals instead of a monolith. Everybody is different, whether they've got neurodiversities or not. Everybody is different and everybody learns differently. And I think if more businesses embraced that as a whole, rather than, oh, we need to support these because they're neurodiverse, it's everybody's an individual and everybody learns differently. We have neurotypical staff here that have found some of the ways that the way that the processes are set out for me, they prefer that version to you. And it's not because they're neurodiverse, it's just because that's how they learn. So I think if we all took the time to, treat everyone as an individual with individual needs, equality and diversity is not about everybody treating everybody the same. It's about treating everybody as they need to be treated. So if we all embrace that, then whether someone had a neurodiversity or not wouldn't matter, because you'd be treating everybody as an individual anyway.
Excellent, thank you. One last question then, before I let you get on with your busy day. If you could tell your younger self one thing about embracing your neurodiversity, what would it be?
I think it would just be embrace who you are. Don't hide, don't cover up, don't spend all that time masking, trying to fit in. Not everybody fits in, and that's okay. And you will find the people that you fit in with. You will find your people one day. Everybody does. And like attracts like.
Love it.
So
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, Anne, and thanks for sharing your experiences and insights, because they always make a difference if we can share these stories and help
definitely.
other people to, share their own. As we say, we need to talk more. Ultimately,
Definitely.
we just need to talk more. So your perspective is absolutely invaluable. We're proud to celebrate the incredible contributions that you bring here at Acacia, and all of our colleagues, whether neurodiverse or neurotypical, but as you say, as individuals and what they're bringing to our team. To everyone watching, let's continue to learn, support, embrace the unique strengths that each individual brings, as Anne has rightly said, both to workplaces and communities. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We do have some other neurodiverse colleagues later in the week who are going to talk to us about their experiences. Can't wait to share them with you. Thanks.